let's talk about debuffers. Hello everybody, I'm Roadblock, and this is a Raid Shadow Legends video. And today we're going to continue the series that I started a couple days ago where we were talking about roles. I know I already made a video talking about nukers in general. Now I want to make one that is specifically talking about debuffers. I think it's very important to understand the role of a debuffer because it can get very easy to get away from the usefulness of a debuff. So let's kind of talk generally what is a debuffer, right? That is somebody that is going to put debuffs, negative buffs, on the enemy team. That will provide you some type of support. Now, this is not to be confused with your control champions, which we will talk about later, or even your poisons and burns and bomb champions. Those are debuffs, yes, but what I'm specifically talking about here are going to be champions whose sole focus is to place debuffs on the enemy in support of other champions to make them do more damage. Your control champions will place debuffs to manipulate the enemy team, meaning stun, fear, petrify, right? That sort of stuff. And your poison and bomb and burn champions, their goal is to ultimately do damage with the specific debuff that they use. These champions are more often than not going to be champions that provide a level of support and amplify those other champions and make them better. So we'll take a look at a couple of examples and, maybe we'll kind of go over a little bit more kind of what I'm talking about. Listen up. I just got a new promo link that you can use to follow along with me on my latest free-to-play adventure and get a free Elenaril as well as 3 more powerful epics as you level up. Here's how to do it. Log out of Play and Play and uninstall. Click the link in the description and register with a brand new email. Launch Raid and complete the tutorial. Go to your inbox and claim your first champ. Don't miss out on your chance to get Elenaril right after signing up, as well as Fayne, Uugo, and Tagoar as you progress through Raid. Click on my link right now and let's crush this together. So if we go to my index, you can see that we have a lot of different champions, right? But if you're thinking debuffer, I'm thinking right away who is probably one of the highest rated debuffers in the game. She's free. Once you beat Faction Wars, you get her. She's amazing, and that is Lydia the Death Siren. Now, why is Lydia such a good debuffer? Well, she brings almost everything that you're looking for, and I say almost. We've got decreased defense and weaken on the same ability. She brings some buffs with that as well that are very handy. Then she also brings a single target block buffs, block active skills, and poison sensitivity. Now, that's not necessarily a major part of her kit. I don't know if anybody that's like, well, I'm bringing Lydia because I have to have poison sensitivity. Most of the time you're bringing Lydia because she brings 2 of the more essential debuffs when it comes to doing damage in Raid Shadow Legends: decreased defense and weaken. Why are these particularly good? Well, if we go take a look very quickly, decreased defense is the big version, which she has, is a 60% reduction in the enemy defense, and weaken increases the damage the target received by 15 for the little version or 25% for the big version. So to have both of these abilities will give you a huge boost to your damage. Defense is the number one way to mitigate damage, and weaken increases the damage that you're doing to enemy that has lower defense. And it is important to understand how effective that decreased defense is and what you're really going to get out of it. You've heard me talk a lot, maybe in other videos, about things like true damage. So decreased defense reduces the defense by 60%. And then if you have champions that can ignore defense by default in their kit, well, now you're getting close to true damage. So we ignore 60% with decreased defense, then another 25%. So now we're at 85%. Oh, and by the way, if you have a particular mastery, Helm Smasher, you have a 50-50 shot of another 25%, which means that you can ignore all of their defense with champions who have built-in ignore defense. In champions is good, but then it becomes even better when you're combining it with things like decreased defense, which is why Lydia is such an essential part of so many different teams in Raid Shadow Legends, because she brings both of them on the same ability as well as a bunch of other buffs and things like that. Other important debuffs that you're going to come across, if we take a look real quick at debuffs, are going to be decrease attack. Decrease attack is going to be one of the more essential ways to survive in difficult areas of the game. In fact, with the recent changes to Chimera, I had to bring a decrease attack debuffer in the form of Lamassu. Otherwise, the lion form was completely wiping the floor with me. So I started bringing Lamassu as my decrease attack champion. She's also my block buffs, which is another essential debuff that prevents the enemy from gaining buffs. That is massive, and actually I'd say very underrated. I know this is something that's a big deal in Chimera and Hydra, but we don't hear this get talked about enough in Arena even, where I feel like block buffs is very, very valuable. However, you know, it is probably more known for being useful in Chimera and Hydra. For Hydra, that prevents any buffs that are stolen from being placed onto the champion or the Hydra head that stole them, and it also prevents key debuffs from not landing. So things like Poison Cloud, you can stop it from landing, reflect damage, and other increase attack, right? All those buffs that will make those heads hurt even more, you can force them to not get placed by something like block buffs. And we also have decrease speed. Now, decrease speed is another massive, massive debuff that is very, very important to most areas of the game, but especially, in my opinion, going to be boss fight. The more that you can reduce the speed of the enemy boss, the more attacks and opportunities that you get to do damage. So decreased speed is a pretty essential debuff in my opinion. And if you can combine these all together and find champions that carry multiples of these debuffs, you can have a lot of success in Raid Shadow Legends. So, but I think decreased attack gets forgotten about. Our stats have gotten so bloated and so high that you often don't think about it. But if you're doing clan boss and you're still struggling to get past certain stages in clan boss, I would highly recommend that you consider bringing somebody that brings decrease attack to reduce the damage that the boss can do. It will help you out a ton and give you several extra turns of survivability to get more damage and maybe hit that cap that you're looking for. Likewise, other bosses that just hit incredibly hard, for example, Ice Golem, decrease attack can be very, very important to prevent your team from getting one shot. Now, why don't we take a quick look at other debuffs, just make sure I haven't forgotten anything. Decrease accuracy is one that is actually very useful. It doesn't get recognized as much, I would say. I don't know that it has necessarily a PvE value as much as it does in PvP to prevent yourself from getting debuffed by the enemy team or bombed or poisoned, right? Decreased crit rate is actually pretty useful in PvE. This is probably pretty underutilized, or I wouldn't really prioritize this in a lot of areas, but this is very, very good in PvE because you can prevent the boss from critting, period. They usually have a pretty low rate of crit. I don't remember the default value off the top of my head, but that's a good one. Block active skills speaks for itself. Decreased crit damage is okay. It's not one that I'm super excited about. Sleep as a control. We won't talk about bomb. Block revive, I don't know that that's really a debuffer. That's more of something that is a byproduct of certain nukers. But we didn't talk about provoke, and that's another thing that we can talk about. When it comes to champions who debuff, provoke is going to be up there usually as something that is a primary part of their kit. Now, not always, but for most champions. For me, my favorite provoker is Nergigante Archer, but then you have other champions that are very big on their debuffs, like Vizix is one that comes to mind. don't have that many other debuffers, but you do have Bivald is a great option. Where's my Molly? Molly is another great option for a provoker, and you know, brings some essential debuffs for you. I consider Tormund to be a debuffer because, well, actually, no, Tormund's more of a control champion, so we won't talk about Tormund here. But when we talk about Nergigante Archer, she's actually one of my favorite debuffers in the game because she brings Hex, which is another debuff we didn't talk about. Its usefulness is pretty much exclusive to Hydra in the sense that what Hex does is it takes the damage and spreads it across, but there are also Hydra heads that have specific interactions with Hex that you're going to want to make sure you have Hex up in order to damage certain Hydra heads. Likewise, she brings Provoke. She also brings Decreased Speed, which is a debuff. You could consider it control as well, but I lean more towards debuff on there. And she's my healer. She fills 3 roles. I happen to have been lucky enough to get 2 of them. Really enjoy this champion, and so, you know, that's just an example of some debuffers. So I think I've talked enough about kind of the buffs and example debuffers. There are probably a few debuffs that I didn't really discuss here, but I think you guys are really getting kind of the gist of it. Things like heal reduction are good against certain bosses. Decreased resistance, again, will help you land debuffs, but other than that, I'm not too concerned. A lot of those, the rest of them are byproducts or associated with damage dealers. So let's move on now to how do you build your debuffer? And I think this is important to understand as well, because I think a lot of people might overestimate or underestimate things. And I think it's very important to understand. So let's say that you're building an arena team and you want to be able to land your decreased defense and your weaken. Well, you're going to want to have a lot of accuracy, but you're also going to want to have speed. And so generally, I'm building speed and accuracy. So what kind of set is really good for speed and accuracy? Well, you have your perception set, right? That's going to be kind of the bread and butter for any of your debuffers. You also have other sets that you've seen me run on this particular account where I have feral set. If you can manage to get 9-piece feral on a debuffer, you're going to get a large amount of accuracy and some pretty reasonable speed, as well as other benefits. For me in particular, allies dealing 5% more damage is why I'm looking to have feral sets on a lot of my debuffers. Now, in the case of Lydia, I do have her in protection, but I don't think it's necessarily a debuffer set. It's just one that fits her well in my particular team comps and the direction that I'm taking her. I've done a whole video as well on another set that I use quite often with Uugo, which is the Affinity Breaker set. Now, what this does is it has a 50% chance to change a weak hit into a critical hit. So if you did land a weak hit on a negative affinity champion, then you have the chance to potentially turn that into a critical. We don't care about the critical so much. We just care that it's no longer a weak hit and it becomes a non-weak hit, allowing you to place those debuffs on a particular champion or particular head in Hydra or boss that you might have a harder time landing those debuffs on. So I think that's one set that is going to be important. But let's take a look at my Uugo here. We've got 275 speed and we've got 377 accuracy. So as far as being my debuffer, reasonable stats, but remember, think about where am I using Uugo? I'm using Uugo in Hydra. I'm using Uugo in, well, not even really faction wars. I am using her there, but we won't go down that road. So I only need as much accuracy as is required to land her debuffs. I don't need to go beyond that. I see this a lot where people just stack accuracy and have maybe like 150 speed debuffer with 700 accuracy, and that doesn't really do anybody any good. You don't need that much accuracy to land your debuffs. You just need enough accuracy to guarantee that it's going to land, provided there are no weak hit. And you'd be surprised at how low that threshold might be in certain areas of this game. So I want to emphasize that because I see it all the time where people over prioritize accuracy. Now, you may be saying, well, in Arena, I need to have this much accuracy because they're going to resist these debuffs and so on and so forth. And that I can understand a little bit, but let's keep in mind the meta these days when it comes to Arena. I've heard other Arena players that are far better than I am when it comes to Arena say things like this, and it's the fact that mythicals exist in the game now. Let's look at my Commodus, for example. Now, he is not a debuffer. We're not here to talk about him in particular, but look at his accuracy at 438 total. Right? That is not a lot. That's not a lot. I wouldn't expect that to be a lot, except for the fact that he gets to ignore resistance. I get to ignore 20% resistance. So you're seeing a trend now where far fewer players are running these high resist builds. Do they still run them? Absolutely they do. But having these crazy high levels of accuracy in I would say many cases might not be the necessary play. I would also argue that you're playing to your player level. If I get on my free to play right now, I'm in silver because I've been playing it again recently. I don't need anywhere near those levels of accuracy to land my debuffs, right? Think about the player power that you are and the opponents that you're going against. Do you need 700-800 accuracy, or can you get away with a faster team? Can you get away with using other abilities or manipulating other mechanics and getting more out of your champions and replacing that accuracy with something else? And I think it's just something to think about. It may not be the answer. You may be in a bracket of this game where you say, man, I have to have 800 accuracy or I can't land anything with my Lydia. Hey, that's the world that you might live in, but I'm not in that on this account. I actually land a majority of my debuffs with my Lydia. I land a majority of my debuffs with other champions. Plus, we have champions out there that place unresistible debuffs, which is a whole other thing that we'll talk about here shortly. So generally, to kind of rein things back in, you're looking for speed and you're looking for accuracy for your debuffers, but keep in mind the levels of that accuracy that you're really looking for, because speed is king, and if I can get more speed out of a champion, the better. Again, not a debuffer, but I think this is really interesting to note. This is Bolent Freewalker. He is not a debuffer. He is a control champion, and we'll make a... Well, technically he kind of is, because he has decreased defense, but his role for me is as a control champion. And I do have him at 433 accuracy, but again, this is a champion that ignores 50% of resistance. If I have 3 skinwalkers with him, which I do, I build a team around him. And so, you know, you can kind of get where I'm going with this. So just keep that stuff in mind, because it drives me nuts when I do a takeover and I see a very slow champion, because it's like, look, he's fast. Like, he's 371 speed. I think he is the fastest champion on my account. I may be behind Mikage. No, yeah, 371. He's the fastest champion on my account, and I managed to do that and still get 400 accuracy, and I'm able to... I've never had an issue with his stuff getting resisted. So, anyways, we talked about that enough. I wanted to talk about irresistible debuffs for a minute, because those can't be 3%ed. And if you don't know what 3% means, there's always a 3% chance that any debuff that you go to place can be resisted. So your debuffs are not 100% chance, they're a 97% chance to land on anybody unless they place irresistible debuffs. And so I don't know that I have too many of irresistible debuffers. I guess my best one is Elenaril. Yeah, the buff removal and debuff placement cannot be resisted. So I have block buffs, decreased defense, and weaken. Those are conditional, of course, which I wish they weren't, but that's another video for another time. So when you have those, you can't get 3%ed, and of course, you don't care about the enemy's resistance. But I wanted to just mention that. I think it's worth mentioning when we're talking about that. So I feel like I've said everything I was looking to really touch touch on when it comes to debuffers in this game. Really, really good early game debuffers to keep in mind. I really like Tagoar. I think he's a great debuffer. A great decreased defense champion that you can get early on, albeit on a 4-turn cooldown, which is a little long, but still really good. Another good one, also a damage dealer, is Dithy, who has another 4-turn decreased defense. And my favorite, Deacon Armstrong, a 3-turn decreased defense, and he has an extra turn mechanic, and he brings leech, and he brings a 19% speed aura. I absolutely love Deacon Armstrong. Again, this is probably the one that I see most often having insane accuracy levels and no speed, because a lot of players were able to get him very early on, or they pull him very early on. He is a powerhouse champion, but you want to keep him kind of quick, you know? You don't just want to go crazy with the accuracy. And you can look, even me, I've only got him around, 320 something accuracy. So actually 330 something accuracy. So, and I still use him quite a bit in faction wars. Even a few arena teams, Siege, I actually use him quite a bit for his all battles aura. So some things to keep in mind for you guys. Same thing with Madame Saris, another really, really good debuffer that I just feel like doesn't get built the right way on a lot of different accounts. So either way, guys, thank you for watching. We'll call it a video. I hope this helped. I hope this opened your eyes to the concept of debuffers, and maybe will change your approach on how you build them and how you use them. Speed is king in this game. People forget that quite often or don't know it. And remember my saying, you don't know what you don't know. But if you are new here, I hope to enlighten you on what you don't know and perhaps guide you in a better direction. So thank you for watching, and if you're new here, please consider subscribing. It is the best way to support my channel and get more recommendations for what you don't know. Either way, I will see you all in the next video. Take care.